next guest is Ajay Banga, big favorite
Ajay
in India.
President
Both
of the World
Mr.
Bank.
Banga and his brother, icons of excellence in India. He's coming in, he's just recently taken over. And again, like Dr. Geeta Gopinath or someone like a Rishi Sunak, symbols of what India can do. The Prime Minister really likes Ajay Banga. And there's several occasions where for important international assignments he's used the services of Ajay Banga. And Ajay Banga too, big admirer of the Prime Minister as well.
And Shiv and Ajay Banga have something in common. Both are from Stephens. So he's a Stephanian, he's IIM Ahmedabad, he's been someone who's a product of the great Indian success story, CEO of MasterCard before he went to the World Bank, and reflects the rise in a way of the Indian corporate technocrat or corporate leadership that India has across the world.
These are the best values of India: hard work, self-made, super bright at the international level. And he's really a very big Indian success story. To helm the World Bank at this time is a massive achievement.
Shiv, it's time that St. Stephen celebrated the Ajay Bangas of the world as well.
He's been on TV the world over for a very long time, chief of the World Health Organization. Also the fact, Shiv, that there were lots of questions about how he was seen as being pro-China initially. But he's had a tough role to play.
He had a pretty thankless job. I think the world was right in criticizing him for his
Director General
defending
of the
China.
World Health
We also have to acknowledge, Rahul, that Tedros Adhanom, the chief of the World Health Organization, did have to finally come around to acknowledging India's amazing role, especially in the latter half of the COVID pandemic, the end of 2021-22. Where he had many good things to say about India and had to really temper the things he had to say about China. But I agree with you. This was a tough role to be in and at a time of, historic medical emergency for the world. So here he is, visibly aged and at the G20.
No one's had a more difficult role, really, among multilateral organizations in the last few years than he has. And thereby, I think the WHO really was on test. There's been a lot of criticism of WHO's leadership at times. But the worst seems to be over. And, Dr. Tedros is an Egyptian, representing in a way the fact that the WHO also is less of a sort of West-centric body than ever before. A lot of his deputy director generals are all people from the third world, or what will be seen still as the third world.
This is Matthias Common, Secretary General of the OECD, coming up to meet Prime Minister Narendra Modi next. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, led by its Secretary General Matthias Common, one of the international institutions that is a part of the G20. So you have the G20 countries, which is G19 plus the European Union, and then you have 14 international institutions that are also a part of the G20. The weather in Delhi is stunning at this moment. It's raining just a bit. It's not raining too much that there's a traffic. that the city starts crumbling, but just it's just perfect weather at this moment.
Absolutely. And
there's rain forecast for later, though, like last night when President Biden landed.
Her Excellency Ms. Nozi Okonjo-Iweala, Director General of the World Trade Organization.
And the World Trade Organization is clearly in the spotlight, because there has been a belief that the World Trade Organization is going to face many of the challenges now in the post-COVID world. We've seen an inability to reach agreements on critical issues of trade, China in particular under the scanner for its role in this regard. So I think, and the wonderful thing is you've got women in a lot of these leadership positions today, which also represents how the world is changing.
Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, Director General of the World Trade Organization.
Osomani, President of Comoros and Chairperson of the African Union.
It's a big moment for Azali Assoumani because if the African Union does become a permanent member of the G20, it would have happened on his presidency. So that's something that then gets etched in history with him, and you can see the warmth, warmth of the embrace, and the warmth of that handshake. Was that ship just the first Jappi or mini Jappi?
That looked like a half Jappi, but that's pretty much all I think can happen. That could very well be a headline picture if things go the way India wants them to go as far as the African Union is concerned, Rahul. The first Kodak moment for today, and the first Jappi, as a matter of fact, in front of the Konark wheel. So the dignitaries are continuing to arrive now. This is the leader of Oman who's just walked in to be welcomed by the Prime Minister.
His Highness Syed Asad bin Tariq Al Said, Deputy Prime Minister of Oman.
Oman is one of the invitees from India. Every host country can have some invitees, so the nation of Oman is one of the countries India has chosen to invite. And in fact, the countries you invite say a lot about your priorities internationally. So the fact that the Omanis have been invited is interesting as well. Asad bin Tariq bin Taimur Al Said, the Deputy Prime Minister
Sheikh
of
Hasina,
Oman. This is
Honorable
Sheikh Hasina.
Prime Minister.
So now what we're seeing is
People's
all the
Republic
invitees are coming in, one after another. The countries that have been invited by India, big friend of India, Sheikh Hasina. And this G20 is also seeing the rise of Bangladesh. Remember, Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia, was in Bangladesh before he came to India. And Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, will be going to Bangladesh after this. Prime Minister Modi helping resolve the Bangladesh border dispute with India with the help of Mamata Banerjee on that occasion, Sheikh Hasina. This is one of the successes India has in the neighborhood. While Pakistan and China, India has had fractured relations with, the fact that India and Bangladesh have made some progress is one of the achievements.
And she is, quite remarkably there now in power for 14 years. So she's, there are critics of her who say she's been extremely authoritarian, but she's presided over the rise of Bangladesh. And therefore, Sheikh Hasina has, in a way, gone well beyond her father's legacy. If you look at Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's legacy, Sheikh Hasina has, in a way, put her imprint, in a way, on Bangladesh's future.
President of Egypt, also someone who shares a very warm, a warm rapport with the Prime Minister. They've met a number of times. This is the Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi.
And remember, Prime Minister Modi was in Egypt on his way back from the United States and showing the importance that Egypt is getting with India, and the fact that he's again one of the countries that India has chosen to invite to their G20 during the presidency. The President of Egypt being welcomed by Prime Minister Modi right in front of the stunning Konark wheels.
This is the Mauritius Prime Minister who's up next. Yeah, there he is. Pravind Kumar Jugnauth is the Mauritian Prime Minister. India Today scored the first interview with him. He was the first government leader who spoke to the Indian media, and obviously that was on India Today.
He spoke of his love for Hindi films, the cultural ties.
Singham is one of his favorite films, he said.
You've got a country, again, where India has a rich sort of relationship with. I mean,
His Excellency, the Honorable
you've had series of Prime Ministers there, all of Indian origin. And therefore those links are very, very deep. And, you can go back to Shiv Sagar, Ram Ghulam, the other Prime Ministers from Mauritius. Each of them have had a very deep relationship with India. And obviously the Mauritius route, as it's called, has led to a lot of controversy when it comes to financial transactions. But when it comes to, just the relationship between the two countries, it's been very strong and built on ties that stretch well over a century.
Again, one of the countries that India chose to invite to the G20. Now, we're seeing the Prime Minister of Netherlands just walk in.
Mark Rutte is the Prime Minister of the Netherlands.
His Excellency, Mr. Mark Rutte, the Prime Minister of the Kingdom of the Netherlands.
You know, look at the flamboyance, the flair, just the walk. You know,
Dutch warmth.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and warmth there being exchanged between the Prime Minister of
And he's
India.
also been around for a long time.
A big jumpy
He
there.
gets a nice jumpy.
Yeah, you know, was sworn in 2010, so he's been around for more than a decade. The last time he won by a majority of 1. You know, that doesn't happen too often, but he's been around for a long time. So there's, you know, this is another country which has seen a lot of stability within the European context. And, you know, Netherlands is, again, a country where whose corporates are all global brands.
Next up is the Nigerian president, Bola Tinubu, who was actually the first to arrive for the G20. He came a couple of days ahead. We understand that he had some medical issues to attend to in India, which has some of the finest hospitals in the world. Medical tourism also a big thing here in India. President of Nigeria, now being welcomed by the Indian Prime Minister.
Bola Ahmed Tinubu, President of Nigeria, walking in.
His Excellency,
geopolitical red
Mr.
carpet, as
Bola
it were.
Ahmed Tinubu, President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Nigeria really is one of the countries in Africa which has been on the move, seen as a future powerhouse, an engine of global growth in the years to come. So they're really seen as one of the bright sparks in Africa. Some very interesting developments on the business scene there. A warm namaste to the President of Nigeria. The first guest, he came in on the 5th of September.
It was very interesting. Some Indian newspapers actually had full-page ads of a state within Nigeria which had built relationships with Indian corporates, especially in the infrastructure sector. So you've got a lot of Indian companies actually who are now building large-scale highway projects in Nigeria.
His Excellency, Mr. Lee Hsien Loong, Prime Minister of the Republic of Singapore.
This is the outgoing Prime Minister of Singapore, of course. There is an Indian origin Prime Minister, a Tamilian, in fact, who takes over as the new Prime Minister. Tharman Shanmugaratnam, who is the new Prime Minister. This is the outgoing Prime Minister.
Lee Hsien Loong coming in, took office on the 12th of August 2004. Again, one of the invitees to the G20, signifying India's choices on the global scene in terms of the...
And Prime Minister Modi's had a very strong, enduring relationship with the leadership of Singapore. Even when he was Gujarat Chief Minister, it was one of the states, one of the countries with whom he had built a rapport and almost saw Lee Kuan Yew as a kind of model to emulate in terms of his commitment to growth of his country.
Her Excellency, Mrs. Nadia Calvino, First Vice President of the Government of Spain and the Minister for the Economy.
This is the leader for Spain stepping in for the Prime Minister.
So the Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has COVID, which is the
COVID.
reason why he isn't coming. Am I correct?
That's correct. He contracted COVID, unfortunately, 3 days ago, and that's when it was announced that he wouldn't be able to make it. There was a bit of a scare with Joe Biden as well, as we know, with his wife contracting COVID, but he still managed to make it. He had 2 tests, one in the US and one in Germany, where he made a small stop. And thankfully, he has been able to make it. About 10:15 is when we'll see Biden arrive at the Bharat Mandapam. That was the Spanish Vice Prime Minister.